Your time is running out. If you want to get questions to us in time for our July Ask Us Anything episode, you need to submit them right now.
And you can submit those questions at GenreVision.com. There's a post that you can comment on with your questions, or at that same website, you can go to our contact page and email us questions privately if you'd like, but we need those questions.
As of right now, that Q&A episode's going to be real short, Chief. So if you want to make sure and get your questions answered, do it now or forever hold your peace.
We're gathered here today.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to plead for your questions.
Send in questions, everybody, please. Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is GenreVision.
GenreVision is a weekly movie club where we discuss horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more.
And we are concluding Time Travel Month with a versus episode of The Little Girl Who Conquered Time versus Run, Lola, Run. Two movies maybe a lot of people have not seen. And we're going to start with the one that assuredly a lot of people haven't seen, including Travis and I. This is our first watch of it. The Little Girl Who Conquered Time from 1983. This is, we should say that this is an adaptation of a manga that has been adapted numerous times in various different forms, live action, anime.
Adaptation of a novel, I believe.
Oh, it's a novel. Okay.
Yeah, written by somebody named Yasutaka Tsutsui. And the direction on this is from Nobuhiko Obayashi, who directed one of our favorite Japanese films of all time.
Yes, House. Obayashi-sama has not missed a step, and we can talk about that. This is definitely the most lyrical time travel movie we picked. We went into this pretty blind because we were looking for international films and trying to find stuff that was outside of the box, and we stumbled on this. And the inside joke that we've kept quoting to each other is that when we looked up information on it, it's like, oh yeah, it was the second highest grossing film in Japan of 1983, and now it is practically unavailable in wide release.
Now, there is a link. If you go to our schedule page at GenreVision.com, you'll see a link there to find this film. We did manage to find a copy online, so if you do want to take a look at this film for yourself, and we suggest you do if you think it might be your thing, you can find it.
Well, I will say, going into it, I would recommend letting people know that this is an extremely slow burn of a movie.
It is. I mean, the pacing on it is, I won't say glacial, but it's very lax and lyrical in a way that makes you feel what it's like to exist with the characters in real time, which is important because when they start messing with time later, it is important to like how characters perceive time. Like there'll be long stretches of time where scenes will play out in real time, not in like extended shots or anything like that. But when they start messing with time a little bit and the lead character starts to experience these sort of anomalies in time, they jump out at you. You might think that because this is an Obayashi film that it's stylistically going to be as crazy as House. And for the most part, absolutely not. It's actually fairly reserved for Obayashi.
It's keeping the jack in the box until it springs out in the end.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it does. It definitely lets loose in the third act with all the craziness, and it has some like moments, like some sort of revelatory moments sprinkled throughout. But overall, it's a very kind of relaxed, summery movie that takes place in rural Japan around a high school. And it's about several high schoolers. It's like a main trio of high schoolers, Yoshiyama, Fukamachi, and Horikawa, who go to school together, and they're really close friends. And there is an incident one day after school ends where they're assigned a certain cleaning duty, which to our North American viewers will be like totally foreign. Like, yes, kids are given cleaning duty in school, in public schools in Japan, which is, I think, great.
There's a lab accident that seems to instigate this ability that Yoshiyama, who's our female lead, is going to have weird experiences hopping through time. I describe this, I'm just staying on the kind of the mood, because it's not the tone, it's the mood of the movie that I described as, this is the kind of movie that makes me think about laying in a big green field, just looking up at clouds and trying to be like, oh, that one kind of looks like a bunny. And like, that's just the vibe that this movie has for a lot of it. And I think it will appear boring to a lot of viewers. And I totally understand why, because I was kind of sitting on the edge of like, is this boring, or am I just not particularly clicking with the mood that it's going for? And eventually, because of a big part being the direction, eventually I was like, yeah, okay, I'm vibing with this.
Well, the great thing about it is that, like, even though it might be a little bit slow, I never found anything to be like painful. There was never like a really sour note or a scene where I was just like,
right,
oh, come on already. Like, there was never a scene like that. I was actually really pleased to sit with this movie at its pace and sort of meet it on its own terms, because I also knew that it would eventually get to what I was excited to see about the film. And so the rest of the movie and sitting through it was more of a pleasant discovery. Like, I'm really glad we got to discover this film, because it's something that, I mean, we've just haven't heard about. Like, nobody talks about this. And I feel like it's kind of maybe criminally overlooked. I don't think this is a great film. It's certainly not Obayashi's best, but the fact that it's able to take this low key of a story and approach it with such earnestness and make this teen romance, which occasionally almost feels like a love triangle, and it does sort of indulge in some of that teen love triangle stuff, never makes it insufferable, and it never feels like it's trying to specifically direct itself at a teen audience. It feels more accessible and a little bit more fantastical. You know, it has that injection of genre that makes it pretty delicious.
Like I said, I really started to click with the movie, and I think it's because its direct genre stuff really does not kick off until the movie's about halfway over.
Yeah.
That's when we start seeing that Yoshiyama is experiencing weird things. Like they're doing like their archery, and she's going to shoot an arrow, and as she's lining up to shoot it, she sees a vision of the arrow already hitting the target, and it kind of flips her out. And then that night, there is an earthquake in what is a genuinely creepy moment of surrealism, in which she has these two little kissing cherub little statuettes that are on her bedside that she makes them like kiss every morning. And we start seeing them just gravitating toward each other and kissing. And then she has this doll up on her dresser that starts moving, like its head is looking toward her. We're like, whoa, what the fuck's going on? To realize then that it's an earthquake. But in that moment, it's like, woo, I got creeped out.
Yeah, this movie has its moments, these little surreal moments that it injects where you're like, oh, huh. You know, there's one scene later on, and it has nothing to do with the eventual plot, but she is in the streets of her town at night and feels like she's being followed. And they do this really cool thing where they do this really low angle handheld camera that's like right on the street. And it immediately reads as like a predatory POV where you're like, there's something chasing her. That's really creepy. There's also a scene where she sees a ghostly face in the window of a shop, I think, and there's a clock in the window as well. And she has a vision of the hands of the clock spinning out of control and like shooting out at her. These little surrealist touches are the things that kind of let you know that like, oh, this is all adding up to something. You know, this is leading somewhere. And so I was able to give myself over to the movie to say like, okay, whatever it is you got coming, you know, I'm ready for it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, the movie earned my trust, even though, you know, at first it was like, okay, is what I came to see gonna happen? But eventually it was like, okay, like the build-up is extremely purposeful. Like you said, there isn't a moment that feels like it's just wasting time or that it's dicking around. Like it's all there. If it's not building up certain plot or character elements, it's there to build up the mood of the piece.
Yes, and also, you know, I don't think we should spoil the eventual ending or at least all the details of it because it's pretty wild, the reveal.
I will say this. If you have seen House, which if you've not seen House, see House. It's one of the best movie experiences you'll ever have.
Yeah, it's widely available. It's in the Criterion Collection. It's on DVD. It's on Blu-ray. It's on the Criterion channel. It's on whatever streaming platforms you can, you know, think to find it.
See that movie. It's phenomenal. But if you see House and you see the kind of direct, the stylistic choices that Obayashi makes in that movie with animation and interesting, and not just animate, just like very interesting effects work.
House is from 1977, and there's a bunch of compositing in it. You're like, wow, this was done at the same time as Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean,
Crazy
there's some straight up blue screen moments in that movie that are just magical, where you can see the blue screen edging. I'm like, I don't care. It's incredible.
All it does is add to the movie's surreality. Like, it doesn't detract from the movie at all. So, and the same is true of Little Girl Who Conquered Time, because there are similarly composited elements. There are some like matte paintings that help like expand the scale and the scope of the movie in the third act.
Well, I mean, even early on, there are matte paintings and optical backgrounds and stuff.
When they do the wide, high angle of the town. Yeah,
they do that, or when there's like a storm, like storm clouds rolling over the school when they're at school. It's like, oh, that's a big optical background. It's not really like drawing attention to the fact that it's an effect.
Right. Yeah. The movie kind of lures you in with some sort of lower key, sweeter stuff, and then starts introducing more and more in terms of effects. And that gradual onset of like kookiness is pretty well executed, I think.
I say this a lot on this show, and it's not always something that works, but when it does, I really cherish it. It's kind of an older way of movie storytelling. And when it's like, yeah, you're not going to have the common, every 15 minutes, there has to be a big beat of a set piece or action or effects or something. I like when a movie can successfully pull off the idea of like, we're saving it all to the end. We're building it up and we really want to pay it all off in the end.
Well, I mean, so much of this story's ability to pull off the plot and the character work is hinged on the idea that these central three characters have known each other for a very long time and are very familiar with one another. And it would be easy to just explain that away in exposition. But by having the three characters share the screen for so much time and to spend an extended period getting involved in their little social dynamics, it's like, this helps sell it. Because the eventual reveal of like how those social dynamics came about and like what the actual histories of the characters are is a little mind blowing if you don't know exactly what's going on.
No, I mean, there were moments where I'm like, what? And it took me, I was like, oh, okay. All right. And it really, it is a movie like a lot of these kind of slower burn movies where you can't be playing a game on your phone while you watch it. Like it really, you need your attention.
Well, it's subtitled, so pay attention.
Well, that too, but I mean, it really demands your fullest attention to really get the most out of it. Because there's a great stylistic bookending where the movie starts in a much more narrow aspect ratio, like 4:3 essentially.
Yeah, it's basically full frame. It's in black and white, really contrasty, very pretty.
Yes, and then how color gets integrated into that, in which the character of Fukumachi brings in a flower, because everybody says like, Fukumachi, you're always you pick flowers more than girls do.
Yeah, you're so romantic. Why are you so sensitive? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I wonder who's going to be a big romantic lead. But he brings a flower into frame, and that flower eventually kind of infects the whole movie with color, and then eventually it goes to a wide aspect ratio. Very cool. Again, it's kind of more, I won't say subtle, but it's less in your face effects stuff in comparison to House, and in terms of like your attention will be drawn to the effects when they happen, but it's not like throwing them at you willy nilly until the ending, which again we're not going to spoil. But I can say that there's just visually cool things like how it's brought to life that Yoshiyama is traveling through time, where it's like her silhouette with this aura that's zooming through images, and like a giant composited wave will wash over her as she travels through time. And there's these intense kind of still frame montages of moments. It's very cool. And I mean, you said it's like, oh, it's turning into the end of Evangelion.
Yeah, not the movie end of Evangelion, but the actual like series finale.
Yeah, the last two episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where it kind of devolves into like interior monologues and abstraction. Like so many animes you see, particularly the ones in like standard feature format. By the third act, they devolve into like a bunch of nonsensical psychedelia and like voiceover. And I'm like, okay, I've lost the plot here. This is very pretty. And I appreciate the effort you're putting forth. Like I see so many anime movies like that. And when I watched this, I was like, oh, this would have made a good anime. Well, it turns out they've adapted it into several animes, and I think a manga or two. And at least 2 more live action films, like as recently as like 2010. I think they remade this. So this is a very popular story in Japan. People know this.
Yeah, and I can see why. Like, I see the appeal, especially where it goes and the kind of, and especially, I mean, because I don't want to spoil how it goes, but the opening text, the very first thing you see on the screen in the movie proper, is asking a question about, like, when is love so powerful that it could be bad? Like, that it's, I mean, I'm butchering the actual quote, but it's talking about love being something that it's like, maybe, you know, like, is love something that when it feels almost to a supernatural level, is it something that maybe we need to question? And that's like an extremely mature thesis statement for a movie about ostensibly a high school romance love triangle.
Right. Yeah. This could easily be seen as like a movie to market precisely to teens, and it doesn't just work for the teen demographic. Like, there's enough going on from an intellectual standpoint to be stimulating for Drew and me, and that's great, you know. And it's a lot more reserved than I guess a typical anime would be. You know, it's comedy and its sincerity are not approached with such like extremes. I like how kind of low key it was, and it's just a very sweet, incredibly sincere movie. I did not expect it to be that sincere because House is utterly wacky, and that's the only other Obayashi film I've seen.
I mean, House is sincere in how crazy it wants to be.
Yeah.
It's not making fun of itself at all. It's like, no, this shit rules. Like, but no, I mean, the ending of the movie, the credit sequence ends up being our lead character and actress singing the theme to and this theme, which this and House share a very similar thing in which, like, you're going to hear the theme to these movies a lot during it. But I almost really like that because it's like, yeah, it sticks with me and it makes a statement. And the ending credits are actually going through moments that we saw in the movie and turning it into a music video moment with the lead actress who also sang the actual song.
Yeah, she's great in the movie, by the way. Tomoyo Harada.
The cast is great. They're pretty perfectly cast. It's a small cast for the most part. Again, I don't like overusing this term, but it's a contemplative movie, and in the sense that it's like, yeah, there's not a whole lot of giant, big action swings going on. It's really kind of wanting you to stop and think. And like I said, the best comparison I can say is laying in a nice field on a spring day, looking up at clouds and trying to figure out what they look like. And it's an extremely fun mood. There's also some very endearing outtakes in the end credits.
Oh, the blooper reel is so sweet. Yeah.
Yes. And that's the thing that we walked away with, and that I don't think we were totally expecting with the movie. Is like, that was really sweet. Like, it was genuinely endearing. Like Travis said, it's not a great, like, amazing, oh my gosh, like this is something that has been, you know, a masterpiece that's been forgotten. I'm not going to go that far, but I do think it's unfair that it's been forgotten. And I think part of it might be that its mood is kind of something we as a media culture aren't really super into anymore.
Yeah, we're not really attuned to the kind of rhythms this movie has, and I think that's a shame because it is. This should be, I think, a little bit more popular for what it is. But I mean, it's been adapted so many times that I imagine that some of the adaptations are a little bit more popular. Like, if I go to the Apple Movie Store right now and I look up the director Mamoru Hosoda, the anime director who made Howl's Moving Castle and Mirai. He directed an adaptation of this, and it's available. You can go rent that on the Apple TV Store, and I'm gonna watch it. You know, this interested me enough to see like what it would be like as an anime, and you know, critically, it's done really, really well. So
yeah, well, I've even seen comparisons between this film version, The Little Girl Who Conquered Time, the live action one from 1983 we're talking about, to this more modern anime, which was very critically well received. And when we were watching the movie, I said, it's like, my bet is that the anime is a more traditionally dynamic version of this story.
Probably, yeah.
And that's okay. Like, and maybe it's better. I don't know. But like you said, I really, in retrospect, kind of loved the laid back mood of the movie. And laid back, I'm not saying condescendingly. It's like, oh, it's like lazy or like sleepy sounds like an insult. It's not. Like, I actually like how kind of chill this movie is.
No, it's really, really pleasant in that aspect. But if you're looking for a similar kind of core to the story with a totally different energy, that's when you go to Run, Lola, Run.
Run, Lola, Run was a kind of art house festival darling, and one that I feel kind of broke out in a way that could have only happened at a certain time in a certain place with film audiences, what they were into, and allowing us that little period of time in the very late 90s, like 97 to 99 or 98 to 99, where audiences were kind of like, they were opening their minds a little bit in really interesting ways. And Run, Lola, Run was one of the movies that kind of made a little splash. And it's one I remember seeing when it was available in video stores and probably in the early 2000s. And had not seen it since. So it's probably been 20 plus years since I've seen this.
Same. Yeah. I remember renting this from the video store as well. And so, not having seen it in a long time, I definitely needed a refresh, but it turns out like my memory of the flick was pretty well set. And
oh yeah, you remembered some great stuff. I mean, there's like two images I can call up from this, and I was like, maybe they're not in it. It's like, no, they were there. Like, they were imprinted on me.
Yeah. And this is the kind of movie that we often see as like a debut from a really fantastic director. And it's like, no, Tom Tykwer, the director of this movie, directed his first feature in 1986. So it wasn't until 12 years later that he had like a big sort of breakout hit for himself. And this, got wide acclaim and made a bunch of money worldwide on its relatively small budget. And so it's made its way into pop culture in some really interesting ways. It was very influential for music videos. There were a whole bunch of like bottle episodes of television that were modeled after this. Like there's an X-Files episode that's kind of modeled on Run, Lola, Run. So it became sort of a pop culture touchstone in the U.S.
It really did. I think it was extremely influential. And the basic story is, I love that the movie gets right into it. Well, we can talk about what it essentially or initially sets up, but the basic plot is that Lola and her boyfriend Manny have made some kind of like deal. I think it's diamonds.
Yeah,
was what it was. That
Manny's a small-time crook. He's supposed to do some sort of transportation of diamonds from one place to another, and Lola's supposed to meet him, and she doesn't. She messes up, and he ends up having to walk somewhere and take a subway train. And while he's on the subway train, a homeless man steals the bag from him that has the diamonds in it.
Does it have the diamonds, or is it that he's trading the diamonds and then getting the money, like and getting paid for the diamonds and then the money? Because it's the money. Yeah,
well, I mean, transactionally, what counts is the money, and it's 100,000 Deutschmarks. So the whole thing now is we open on this really dynamic phone call where Manny's in a phone booth and says, Lola, I'm fucked. If I can't get these 100,000 Deutschmarks, my mob boss guy is basically going to come after me and kill me. So we have to do whatever.
20 minutes.
Yeah. In the next 20 minutes, we got to come up with $100,000. And so the time travel element of the film is we see Lola take 3 attempts at this. That's the main conceit. It is 3 runs, basically. It's like a video game of a movie, almost in a...
Yeah, this should be in that conversation of video game movies that aren't, based on video games.
It's a bit of an Edge of Tomorrow kind of thing, but the conceit is a little bit more cagey. Like they're not exactly revealing of how the mechanics of it all work, at least not up front.
Here's what's interesting. This is absolutely a genre film. However, the time travel, if you can hear my air quotes in this, is not really time travel. There is no in-story device, and I'm not saying like physical, like any kind of storytelling device, or there's not the cube that
right.
has anything happen. It's just
there is no concrete explanation as to why Lola becomes sort of unstuck in time, or whether the unstuck in time is just a cinematic artifice. It's
far more metaphysical
and playfully acknowledged in some ways. Like one of the first characters we see talking, even before we meet Lola and Manny,
before the
is
credits
this guy
start.
Who plays, he's the guy who plays a security guard at a bank in the movie. And every time he shows up on screen, he seems to have some sort of extra knowledge of the universe. You know, he seems to be vaguely aware of what is happening. And it's like, what's this guy's fucking deal?
Much like The Little Girl Who Conquered Time, this starts with, instead of text, voiceover, asking us questions about like, you know, what is time? You know, what effect do the choices we make have and all this? And it's, I believe, this security guard speaking, who's then revealed, and he's got a soccer ball, and he says directly to camera, like, the game is 90 minutes. Ready? Go. And he kicks the soccer ball into the camera, which, you know, pulls up in this bird's eye view of a bunch of people walking around who then form the title. And it's like, okay. It's an extremely self-acknowledging moment to kick off. Like, look, there's not going to be a cube. Like things, we're just exploring this idea.
Yeah, let's play a game. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. And in a way, this being what will end up being the last movie we talk about for Time Travel Month, it's kind of interesting because it's sort of a time travel movie, but I like that it's a really unique spin in it. And then I'd really just call it an alternate timeline movie.
It's very tempting to call it that, but there are several moments in the movie that actually kind of look at you as an audience member and go, what if Lola was aware that this was happening? And it's like,
in some ways, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there seems to be some sort of evolution. You know, there seems to be some sort of like sequential nature or, additive nature. Like the three runs seem to add up to Lola's, arc.
Well,
in some way.
Decisions that she ends up making in each one, because this isn't a Groundhog Day. Like Groundhog Day is a great example, like in all honesty, because there's no cube in Groundhog Day.
Right.
Like it's just happening to him.
But Bill Murray's character is fully aware that it is happening.
Fully aware of everything that's going on. Whereas Lola only seems to change her decisions from very specific other things that have happened in previous runs.
Right. There's a moment in the first run where she is able to steal a gun from a security guard in a shopping market, or in a supermarket rather, and she forgets to take the safety off. And
well, she's never used one. She's like, I don't know how this works. And Manny, who's there holding up the place, says the safety, it's the little lever on the side.
Right. And then in the next run, when she manages to get her hand on a gun from the security guard in the bank, she remembers. And in this moment, it really is kind of revelatory where you're like, ooh, something's happening here. Like it really did give me some kind of like goosebumps when I saw it in the movie. I was like, this is something more. Like it's never really fully explained, like just how conscious Lola is of what is happening to her. But there is a remarkable subtlety in this performance from Franca Potente, who throughout most of her screen time is asked to yell, scream, run. Like it's a very big performance in that way, but she's able to play it with like so much pathos.
Well, even when she's getting to stop, she has to act like she was just running, so she has to be doing a lot of
sweating, crying.
Hey, try doing that for 5 minutes, breathing that heavy. It takes it out of you. Like the performance that she gives here is so good in a very in the kind of way that is not something that we often get to see from actors, because it's like, yeah, it's not, she doesn't get like the big Oscar clip monologue moment, but what she's doing is far better than the majority of those kind of moments we see in those kinds of movies.
Well, I mean, good Lord, I would love to have a calorimeter readout of like just how many calories she burned while in production on this film, because she fucking runs her ass off. My God.
Oh yeah.
And in boots too. I mean, she's wearing a pair of boots. She has an iconic look in this movie too, by the way. Boots, green pants, tank top, and this incredible hair job where they've dyed most of her hair like bright red, but it also has highlights of yellow and magenta in it. Just an awesome punk look. I mean, really iconic.
Every time she goes through a run, we go into her neighbor's apartment and go into the television that her neighbor's watching. And on that TV, there's an animated depiction of Lola running down the stairs of her apartment. Mm-hmm. And in that animated depiction, it's like, I see why this costume was so crucial, because this is basically a superhero outfit.
Yes. Yeah. She's just so instantly recognizable. She'll never disappear in a crowd. It's a really brilliant choice for lots and lots of reasons. And Franca Potente just looks incredible in it. And then there are some ideas about it that kind of stunned me that I hadn't quite remembered, in that it's not necessarily just a story about Lola and Manny. there are other perspectives in the film that are really crucial, and it becomes apparent that it's more of a story about a set of characters in a community and how they react to this situation. Because in each successive run, Lola comes across has chance encounters with certain characters. Like she'll run into somebody on the street, and then we get a brief flash, this very quick montage of still photos that shows us what happens in this person's future based on the interaction they just had with Lola. And some of these are like really sobering. Some of them are fucking hilarious, and some are like oddly sweet. There is one in the bank later where it turns out like her interaction with a bank employee causes that bank employee to fall in love with another bank employee, and they end up in like this really sweet dom sub relationship, and they're really happy together. I was like, this is so funny. I loved it.
Well, I mean, this is a great, if you ever wanted to, we at one point, I think I threw it on the table when talking about this month, was like, well, we could do the butterfly effect. And I'm so glad we did Run, Lola, Run instead, because this is a good butterfly effect movie in which the smallest change in her interactions with these people have enormous consequences on where their lives end up going. To the point where she runs into this guy each time that's on a bicycle. And I think the first time she runs into him, we see this, the flash montage we always get. And I think it's like a frame in the movie each time you see "and then" in German. Mm-hmm. And we see the first time that her running into him and their brief interaction causes him to find this woman and get married and have a great life. And then the second time, their interaction changes just slightly. It's not a huge interaction. They just talk a little bit longer. She mentions because he's trying to sell her the bike. And the first time she's like, no, that's pretty much it. But the second time she's like, a bike's stolen. And when that kind of realizes him, when we see his flash, it is then him falling into the depths of heroin addiction and dying like as a homeless bum in a bathroom shooting up heroin. It's like, okay. I mean, I love that little touch to the characters and the style of the movie because this is so fast paced until at the end of each run, we get like a cool down period in which there is this never really explained kind of nothing red space that is just close-ups of Manny and Lola, and they're talking about the relationship because the movie is also about their relationship.
Right. And they're lying in bed and like you said, it feels like this red void nowhere space where only the two of them exist. And it's such a great way to continue to explore the subtleties in their relationship because you think, this guy Manny, he's a small-time criminal, he's a fuck up, like why is this chick with this guy? But they actually managed to sell that these two people are indeed in love, and like this whole thing that she is fighting for, the whole movie is worth fighting for. That is crucial to making this movie work so that it's not just a story about a whole bunch of scumbags who are doing bad things for bad people.
Yeah, it's not even though a crime plot element is kind of the core inciting incident of the movie, it's not a crime movie. Mm-hmm. Like I'm sure on IMDb it has like crime as a genre. It's like, it's not really.
I can see people perceiving it to be kind of like adjacent to some of Guy Ritchie's early output, and that it's like small time Euro gangsters and lots of stylish music video kind of effects. Like I remember that one sequence in Snatch that's intercut with like the chasing of the rabbit. I remember that, so I can understand like if somebody wants to put it into that crime genre. I understand why they might do it.
Yeah, but it's such a small way to look at what is such an interesting formalist approach to a very small, simple story. And like I said, the movie flies by. I said to you when it was like, 30 minutes gone. And you're like 30 minutes. I'm like, yeah, I know. It felt like it was half that.
Yeah. The first run is a half hour. And I was stunned when you said that. I was like, Jesus, really? It feels like we've rocketed through the first 15 minutes of the movie, but no, it was a whole 30 minutes. Shocking.
And this, in comparison to The Little Girl Who Conquered Time, this is another one where it's like, it's not a sour note. There's not a down moment. Like when the movie does stop, and it's primarily in those the red room moments, it's like it's purposeful, it's meaningful, it's kind of necessary to exhale after that long. It helps build the characters, and in a way, like I said, it's like starting the movie in the third act and then pausing and going back to the first act to introduce these characters and get a vibe for them as far as their, what they would do when they were just sitting, laying in bed together.
Yeah.
And I loved that.
Yeah, there's never a scene in this movie that makes you question, like, why would they structure it this way? That doesn't make sense. Why would they?
Oh, not at
this?
all.
So, the one creative choice that I was a little puzzled by in the film, and it's not that it's a bad creative choice, but it is a strong choice, is that it would appear that when there are scenes from the perspectives of characters who are not Manny or Lola, they're shot on digital video. So it almost looks like 28 Days Later and it's a decent chunk of the movie because it doesn't spend all of its time with Lola and Manny. But it's like, I wonder exactly why they did that. And if, the immediate answer is like, well, they didn't want to buy all of that like 35 millimeter film stock. So they just shot a bunch of it on video, which makes sense. But because of the perspective issue, it's different.
It can be a beautiful marriage of like, well, it's a cheaper thing to do, but we can make it into a creative choice where it's like, well, because our world is really focused on Lola and Manny as far as our protagonists and far more so Lola, that the movie, their universes need to look different than these other side universes that are going on.
Right. The digital video almost creates like a documentary feel in some scenes, whereas the stuff that's all shot on celluloid is like incredibly cinematic and dynamic, like just such a different feel.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's so much of the staging there. There's a shot in this where Lola is running, of course, and she is running next to a passing train, this big bright yellow, above ground train, and it's the coolest fucking thing. Like, it's so awesome. Like, that's a shot that sells your movie. Knowing nothing about it, it just looks so well, and how they had to time that out to get it to work is like, man, the movie is just overflowing with style and confidence and attitude. And I mean, you can look even just on the Wikipedia page, there's giant dissertations about the themes of the movie, free will versus determinism and all this kind of stuff. It's a movie that welcomes that kind of analysis.
Mm-hmm. And you leave it on a complete high note. Like, it really is a total blast. It's short. It is pretty much the perfect length, and you do root for Lola and Manny throughout the entire movie. And so by the time they finally manage to kind of get it right, you're like, wow, all right, like, go, you two, go, get out of town, get the fuck, you got what you need, like, go. Like, it's a real victory.
Oh yeah, I mean, the movie's before we switch, I do just want to say the movie's extremely funny.
Oh yeah,
like, I was laughing so much. There's great running gags. There's just a great sense of humor to it. It's such a good time. Like, it's like, I was like, man, it was just a good time of a movie. So now we have the unenviable task of making this a versus. And before we talk about the versus aspect, I do want to say about the incredible serendipity that we had pairing these together, because we did not intend this by any means. And it's wonderful when these kind of, as I call it, the cosmic lattice work of the universe kind of puts things in your lap and you're like, wow, the way these connect, in that there's actually a lot of similarity in the skeletons of these movies.
Right. If you take a core sample from these two movies and you compare them, you're like, okay, these are both stories about young women who become unstuck in time and sort of enter the orbit of these romantic relationships with men. They're kind of stuck circling these really powerful relationships and are traveling through time to do so. So that's really the core of the two stories. And the two pair so well because they are similar at the core level and then yet so different in execution and in tone. They really are an excellent pairing, and that was totally unintentional on our part. We hoped it would be a good pairing. We didn't think it would be this good a pairing. Yeah,
I mean, this is one of the best double features we've ever done. And in a way, I almost want to like scrub the verses and call it a double feature, which we could do because it's our show. But I will stick to what we put out there. Certainly, as far as this being a global gonzo, I think Run, Lola, Run would qualify, and the third act of The Little Girl Who Conquered Time would qualify. But these are such a great pairing that even though when I did my rankings on Letterboxd for these, I ranked Run, Lola, Run significantly higher than The Little Girl Who Conquered Time.
but I can in good faith say it's that much better than The Girl Who Conquered Time.
Well, here's the thing, though. I ranked Run, Lola, Run higher, but I'm giving the verses to The Little Girl Who Conquered Time.
Ooh, now that is an interesting choice. Okay.
Because, of course, if it came down to like, well, which one do you want to rewatch? It's like, I could watch Run, Lola, Run anytime because it's such a like, whoop, oh, great, that was fun moment of a movie. Like, it flies by so fast and it's so wonderfully fun and engaging. But The Little Girl Who Conquered Time is the movie that I keep thinking about. Yeah. Where it's like, yeah, that one's kind of like, I feel like the flowers, the lavender flowers of the movie, as the seed of The Little Girl Who Conquered Time rests in my heart, it will soon slowly but surely grow and bloom into something truly beautiful. It's the movie that I absolutely demand people rediscover because it needs it. It's like, yeah, this is not something that we really get today. Certainly if just looking through the narrow lens of a lot of Japanese cinema and mainstream Japanese cinema, it's not really something that we're getting a whole lot of in the mainstream conversation. And it's one that I'm like, yeah, this is really, really charming. I was charmed by that movie. So I'm giving it to Little Girl Who Conquered Time.
Here's the thing, I'm going to give it to Run, Lola, Run, but again, this is a really difficult choice, and I would say Run, Lola, Run only just ekes out in terms of like how I recommend it to people, because the Little Girl Who Conquered Time, it had to win me over. It's not like I was really displeased with it from the start and it had to, impress me movie. Like, that's not what happened. But it had to slowly work through and win me over by the end, and it sure as hell did. But with Run, Lola, Run, bang, you are immediately hooked. So if I have to recommend one of these two films to somebody who's never seen either, it's going to be Run, Lola, Run. But both are very good.
Yeah, I mean, it's the easy recommend, because if you're not on board with Run, Lola, Run in like the first 2 minutes, just stop, like press stop, because like that's the magic of that movie. It's such an immediate hook. Maybe it's too, but I can also see it's like it comes out the gate swinging so hard that it might be too tough for some people.
It's a lot.
It is, but I don't think we could have, if we tried, picked a better pairing of movies.
Yeah, totally worked out.
Yeah, they paired exceptionally well together. So while I'm giving Little Girl Who Conquered Time the win, I should say watch both of these and watch them the way we did. It was really, we watched them on 2 successive nights, but watch them together. I think it's a great double feature.
Yeah, just be prepared for like a really big disparity in energy between the two of them.
Oh yeah, well
one is like sweet plum wine energy and the other one is like straight Coke.
Yes, well I would recommend going with Little Girl Who Conquered Time first, because it's going to be the slow fuse, and then in that third act, shit's going to get wild in Little Girl Who Conquered Time. Trust us, it gets fucking crazy. And then that sets you up for the like, all right, now I'm really revved up. Let's barrel into Run, Lola, Run. Loved it. And a fantastic end to our theme month, which I'm going to say this right now. We could do this theme month again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's been that rich.
Yeah. I'm really pleased with it. I don't really know if I have anything like to say about time travel as a whole that we learned from this month, but I like the variety of the movies we discussed. I think we have a very good grasp on like, what kinds of variety that the time travel device in narratives can offer. Like, both Time After Time and Time Cop deal with time machine stories, and they're not terribly unconventional in the time machine sense, but like Slaughterhouse-5 and Run, Lola, Run and Girl Who Fell Through Time are all about people who kind of become unstuck for some reason. One loops and the other discovers an ability for time travel after a lab accident, and then one his power is sort of gifted to him by aliens. It's like, okay, there's a pretty wide variety there. So this was a lot of fun. I'm really glad we did this theme month, and I think we curated it. We curated it with a good batch of flicks. So I'm glad, and thank you all for being along for the ride.
Thank you. I mean, the only thing I'd say that I'd learned is basically what you said. When we set out to do this as a theme month, our original thing was unconventional time travel movies. And then that led to us being like, well, what's a conventional time travel movie?
Sure.
And we had to question it. So then we were like, well, let's dump that and let's just kind of try and pick a good hodgepodge of different types of time travel movies. And in doing so, it has reaffirmed, like, you know what? Time travel as a device does not, I think, have the limitations to be called conventional. Like, it's a device that, as many people have said through many time travel movies, like, it totally breaks any story and yada, yada, yada. And I think that's a really limited way of looking at it as a genre-telling device.
Absolutely.
Like,
I'm just glad that none of the movies we watched really had any acknowledgement of the most popular time travel movies of all time, Back to the Future.
No, they didn't. And I mean, the one that we started off with, Time Cop immediately was like, look, we'll say the kill Hitler thing right away. Like, we're just getting stuff out of the way. This is what we want to do. And it's actually really encouraging to me about time travel movies, because I think if you're going to use it as a device, these movies that we've done have told me, like, don't fucking worry about that stuff, because it's not going to be how you will tell your best story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a device that can be used in a variety of ways, as we've seen, and one that I think potentially we could revisit, because there's a smorgasbord of these types of movies that offer extremely different flavors to enjoy. So yeah, great theme month. I hope you all enjoyed it. But now we are going to head over to the shelf, where we pick a movie that might act as a good pairing or substitute for our main topic. And we encourage you, loyal listener, to go to GenreVision.com and comment on the post for this episode with your own shelf pick, because the shelf is a collaborative thing. We're building this magical video store together. And we're pulling stuff off to recommend to each other. So if you do leave a shelf pick by commenting at GenreVision.com, we will feature it on next week's episode. So Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for The Little Girl Who Conquered Time and Run, Lola, Run?
Well, let's see. Little Girl Who Conquered Time was the second or third most popular film in Japan for 1983. What was it?
Second. It was the second most popular. I've made that notation.
Well, this is the most popular film from Japan in the year 2016. It's a movie called Your Name, and it is an anime flick that's really fucking good. It is a high school romance, and there is some time travel in the movie. I'm not going to say anything more than that, but there is some time travel.
This is the body switching one, right?
Yeah, that's the primary sort of genre hook, is it has a teenage girl and a teenage boy waking up in each other's bodies. Like, their consciousnesses have traded bodies, and they don't really seem to know why, but it continues to happen frequently and seemingly on a somewhat predictable schedule. And by the end of the movie, I did not expect to be as invested in it as I was, because I thought, like, oh, well, it's kind of like anime high school silliness. Like, oh, tee-hee, boobs are funny. Aren't short skirts a thing? Yeah, sure. But I find most of that kind of stuff really tiresome about anime.
Oh, yeah.
It's my least favorite stuff in Evangelion. Like, if I could skip all that shit in Evangelion, I would.
I mean, it's in that particular instance, and a lot of these things, they're doing stuff, and I think a lot of smart writers are aware of it, but it is just, I'm the same way with so many anime tropes of, like, man, the looking at the clouds voiceover can get really, really annoying in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
But this has a really fun pop punk soundtrack by a really good Japanese band. Really fun, energetic, beautifully animated movie. Just gorgeous to look at. That is Your Name. It is popular for a reason. It's good, y'all. Anyway, what are you pulling off the shelf?
I'm sure I've done this before, and I think I've even done an episode of it with Nick Murray when he was the co-host. But it's a movie that I love recommending, and that's Time Crimes by Nacho Vigalondo. This if I was going to do a triple feature, I would do, like, The Little Girl Who Conquered Time, Time Crimes, and then Run, Lola, Run. Time Crimes is like a great little middle movie, because it's a little bit more conventional. Like, there is a time machine that is utilized, but the movie is just such a simple, well executed premise. It's got a great iconic villain. It looks like a slasher villain. Mm-hmm. A great image. It's just great imagery, and really plays with the idea, which Run, Lola, Run does as well, of revisiting moments in a movie that you've seen before, now from different perspectives. Like, which of course Back to the Future 2 did very kind of, cheeky in its third act. Time Crimes is like one of the best executions of like, what if you could just keep rewinding the movie, but know you were rewinding the movie in a sense?
Sure. And at a certain point when like you catch on to the structure of the film, you think like, oh, I think I know who that is. I think I know what I'm watching, but why would that character do that? And then the movie pulls off like a great explanation as to why the character would do that. You just got to stick with it. Like it's darkly comic and very chilling and horror tinged throughout. Like a great flick.
Great flick. Love it. Even talking about it now, I'm like, I could just sit and watch Time Crimes. But Time Crimes, check it out. Now, the listener shelf picks for last week's episode on Time After Time. We will say that we did not have the listener shelf picks for the last 2 weeks of episodes. You can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/GenreVision. We will have a free episode up that's catching up on those and another free episode up in case you know why we weren't able to do those. But we're back and doing it live. So we have listener shelf picks for Time After Time. Eric Fuchs suggested A Toy for Juliet, which is a story, and Things to Come, the H.G. Wells movie, which I believe is part of the Criterion Collection, which I've never seen and have always wanted to. So good pick. Stephen S. Bella went with an episode of Kolchak the Night Stalker, the incredibly influential series that, you know, there's no X-Files or Supernatural without Kolchak. And this is called The Ripper. Waldrumpus went with Time Changer, another who also, if you go listen to the Patreon episode, I believe Waldrumpus also recommended a movie called Time Tracks. There's a theme going on here, Waldrumpus, and I like it. Mr. Milksteak also seconded your shelf pick, Travis, of Star Trek 4. Also suggested a drink called a London Fog, which is Earl Grey tea, steamed milk, and vanilla cream, which sounds very much up my alley.
It's basically an Earl Grey tea latte.
Yeah, it sounds great. I love that. And then also, Mr. Milksteak suggested Somewhere in Time, which is the Christopher Reeve and, oh my gosh, who's the female lead in that? I'm just completely blanking. Jane Seymour. Sorry about that. And that is actually a movie that we contemplated doing.
Let it show for the record that Drew is exhausted and just burning through the last bit of like the crud in the gas tank. Like,
that fuse is just about to explode. So we'll see how much more. But yes, Jane Seymour and Christopher Reeve, Somewhere in Time, was a movie that we actually had on the table for doing this month. So I think if we come back around to doing this theme month again, I think we're going to cover that one because that's another one that's kind of a little out of our wheel. It'd be like it's not kooky like Simply Irresistible that I remember, but it's a very kind of different vibe for us, which I like. And last but certainly not least, loyal listener Hobb suggested Joan and Peter, which was written by H.G. Wells, which is a very different kind of story than what I think a lot of people are used to from his writing. Go check out the comments there to read everybody's wonderful descriptions of these shelf picks. Love doing these every week. Thank you so much, everybody, for dropping these in. It really is. It's become one of the cornerstones of the show, and it wouldn't be there without y'all. So thanks so much. Now, we do have to switch gears and do some quick calls to action, but stick around because we do have Currently Consuming and Comment of the Week coming up. We're going to be talking about the new Guy Ritchie film, Wrath of Man, and also the Lin-Manuel Miranda film, In the Heights. So as we mentioned, you can go to patreon.com/GenreVision and you can listen to those free episodes that we did. We have all the shelf picks together in what's essentially this week's pre-show. And if you like what you hear over there, you could become a premium subscriber for just $5 a month, and then you'll get access to all of our weekly pre-shows, all the bonus material we do. We do extended Currently Consumings every month. We're going to be recording the one for this month very soon. And go check all that out, and it's just $5 a month, and then you can go chill out with us over there on Patreon. It's fun times. Also, we would like to say, if you really love what we do here, we would love it if you went to the Apple Podcast Store and left a rating and a written review, because they help us out so very much. It's a very small thing, but you would be surprised at how much weight those things carry. So if this is something that you can do for us, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and if you leave a written review, we'll feature it here on the show. And last but certainly not least, our Q&A episode is coming up, and we are cutting off submissions at the end of June. So as you listen to this, you only have a couple days left to submit questions for our Q&A episode. please submit them. You can do it either at GenreVision.com. There's an Ask Us Anything post that you can comment on, or you can use our contact link at GenreVision.com, and you can send us your question by email. However you want to do it, we need those questions. Now, we can head over and do some currently consuming.
Nom, 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 nom.
Travis, what's been on your plate?
Very quickly, I wanted to talk about the new musical film In the Heights, which I watched with my mom when I was visiting her. And we watched it on HBO Max, and it is good. I mean, everybody is gushing about it, and I see why. I mean, it's a big crowd pleaser with some fun music and fun performances, and really good direction from John Chu. Some really fun set pieces. Nothing I found terribly mind-blowing or inventive, but it's all well executed. And the emotional beats hit where they should, and yeah, it's just a good time. You know, it's not something I don't think that will be in my favorites of the year, you know, certainly not in my top 10, but like it's just a damn good time, you know, and I like I like its whole exploration of the sort of Afro-Latin diaspora, and it's funny, you know. It's just a damn good time at the movies. It's what you want to see when you go see like a big contemporary movie musical. So
really quickly, because I have stayed ignorant of it, could you synopsize the story?
Sure. Yeah, it takes place in Washington Heights, the neighborhood in New York City that's predominantly like Latin Caribbean. And the protagonist is this guy named Usnavi who runs a bodega in Washington Heights. And we meet this sort of ensemble cast of people around him, you know, his acquaintances and friends and romantic interests. And there is this guiding sense in the movie, like throughout all the characters' lives, that there is a period of their lives coming to an end because rent is going up in Washington Heights, which is forcing people out. Usnavi has a dream of actually returning to the Dominican Republic where he's from to run a business. You know, it talks about ambitions and what people want to do with their lives. And it all revolves around that sense of like, you know, what is the next stage of my life, and, you know, what is the next big step for me. So that is the most general summary I can give of what happens in the film, because all the characters go through these arcs that mirror that same idea, you know, the ambition and moving to a next step in life.
Well, on my end, I watched the new Guy Ritchie film, Wrath of Man, because I really haven't seen, realizing I've not seen a lot of Guy Ritchie movies. Like I've seen Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and we've done Snatch here on the show. But I think the only other movie of his that I've seen is the King Arthur Legend of the Sword. Haven't seen anything else, and this new one was getting pretty decent reviews. So I checked it out, and I thought it was really solid. I did not know that it was a remake of a French film called Le Convoyeur, or also known as, I believe, Cash Truck. I read the synopsis of the French original after watching the remake. The remake does something very clever as a remake, and I think it actually is potentially the more interesting idea. The French version might execute itself better. I don't know. But Wrath of Man was an interesting blending of genres, because it's a revenge movie, but it's also a heist movie. And I like that. I like that kind of blending of those two ideas. It's got a fantastic cast. Jason Statham's doing his thing, but you've got like Holt McCallany and Josh Hartnett and some other people I'm forgetting right now, but who I swear were really good in it. It was a really solid, good time. I don't know. Good time is hard because it's like, it's a, you know, gruff, dark revenge thing. There's some commentary I picked up about like capitalism and two different forms of capitalism going to war at each other, to war with each other, and rather. There's also some, I don't want to talk about that. That might be a spoiler. So it's solid. It's not something that I could like recommend to you, Travis. I don't think there's enough in there to get over the threshold of certain kind of things that just aren't going to interest you in those kind of genre pictures. But for most people, I would say like, yeah, if any of that kind of sounds appealing, the basic story being that Jason Statham is this guy who's signed up as a security guard for a cash truck, you know, place that goes and picks up money at different businesses and then brings it back and, you know, transports it to banks and stuff like that. And it opens with a stick up, and it's an extremely well filmed kind of single take stick up. and then he signs on, and it becomes very clear, like, okay, he's here for a reason. Like, what's the reason that he's there? Who died in the stick up in the opening that we saw? But the revelations that it has are like, okay. And it keeps revealing itself as it goes on in really kind of fun ways. And then it ends up being a real big kind of Heat-esque, I will say, in the sense that the final big heist is this very, kind of big showdown moment. And it's all filmed very well. It's all very thrilling. But it's dark. It does go to some pretty dark places that I think will be rough for some viewers, so I will say that. The only thing I'll leave off on is it is the first movie I've seen to properly use Scott Eastwood, he has been a total bland Danny in everything I've seen him in up until now. And this one, they're like, what if we cast him as a bad guy? And I was like, hey, Scott Eastwood's not a bad guy. Like, he's not in the movie a ton, but they use him very well. And it's like, I think he might be a better heel than trying to replicate some kind of, just I'm handsome man hero guy. Like, he's not bad in this. So I have to give it points for that, because I was like, Scott Eastwood's a write-off. Stop casting him and things. So I give it that. If nothing else, Wrath of Man. See it if you want to see Scott Eastwood be kind of decent. So we will now wrap things up with our comment of the week. And this one's actually kind of a double up from last week's episode on Time After Time and the previous episode on Slaughterhouse 5, because we got comments from both Stephen Esbella and JT asking us about some issues that they had with the player on our site, and I believe the episode populating in particular on particular platforms, and Travis, being the absolute wunderkind that he is, answered those questions and did his best to address the issues. And that's what we want. Like, if you have issues, we're here to listen to them.
Yeah, we offer technical support. This is an art form that is highly dependent upon technology, and when that technology doesn't work correctly, you can let us know, and we'll do our best to address it.
So we want to give you all the best show, and we want to do it in a way that is accessible to you as best as it can be, because we love y'all and you keep the show going. And we hope you've enjoyed this theme month. We are going to be taking a legitimate week off next week. It feels weird because Travis went on vacation, but we banked those episodes and everything. But we do need a little time. We normally take a week off. We might spend that week working on some other stuff that is in the GenreVision family. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the other GenreVision shows, you might have an idea of what's going on, because it's summer, and summer means something here in GenreVision. So we will be off next week, but then we will be coming back, and we will have 3 weeks of episodes. One of those is going to be our Ask Us Anything, and then we're going to be picking 2 episodes that are basically, I picked any movie I wanted to do, and Travis gets to pick anything he wants to do. You can go check out what they are in the schedule. They are subject to change, but we will be back, and I think we're going to go for some... We'll see how it's going to go. I have no idea how those movies are going to be. So, but we hope you'll stick along with us. As always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Deitch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we'll see you, well, not next week, but the week after.
Right here on GenreVision.